All right. Minor technical difficulties to get started, right? That's when you know you have a good Zoom session happening. Okay. Well, hello, friends. It's so nice you could join us this evening for the next in our series of virtual events, Ysleta del Sur Pueblo, the history of the Church of the South. As always, our hope is that through these events, you will continue to get to know us, the Friends of the Texas Historical Commission, and learn more about our mission to support the Texas Historical Commission in its preservation efforts across the state. Many of you have chosen to support us with donations through these events, for which we are so grateful. Thank you. I want to welcome our THC commissioners, friends, board members, and advisors, as well as some of our colleagues at the Texas Historical Commission who are here with us today. Thank you all for making the time to join us. I'm Christy Poliquin, Development Manager for the Friends of the Texas Historical Commission, and I'm joined tonight by Carrie Alejo, our Office Manager and Bookkeeper, who will be helping me with the chat and with other technical things. So thank you, Carrie. If you haven't already followed us on social media, please do so. We'd love to connect with you. This is also how you can find out about future events like our next virtual event, Make Do and Be Merry, a chocolate cake for a home front Christmas. It's scheduled for December 1st at 6 p.m. In this presentation, Margot McCutcheon, who is an educator at Sam Rayburn House State Historic Site, and Jennifer Parsley, an educator at the Eisenhower Birthplace State Historic Site, will explore how two 1940s era cake recipes approached the challenges of rationing as homemakers made do to bring Christmas to their holiday table. We hope you'll be able to join us for that session. You can register for that session already through our website. A few housekeeping items before I introduce today's event and our speaker. We would sure appreciate it if you could keep your microphones on mute. We are also recording this event. As I mentioned, we'll send you a link after, probably be a day or two, but we will definitely send you an email with the link and any other resources that may come up that we want to share. We'll do a question and answer session after the presentation. So if you want to go ahead and put questions in the chat box as the presentation is going on, that would be great. And we'll answer as many questions as we have time for after the presentation. Special mention tonight, we are joined by two Texas Historical Commission staff members. Brad Jones is the Division Director and State Archaeologist. And Marie Archambault is the Tribal Liaison and Archaeologist, and they are both with the Archaeology Division at Texas Historical Commission. So Brad and Marie, thank you, welcome, and thank you. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, we want to acknowledge, honor, and recognize the diverse Indigenous peoples connected to this land we now call Texas. The Texas Historical Commission fully supports the sovereign rights of all 29 federally recognized tribes that maintain strong connections to the state. And we respectfully acknowledge the 3 federally recognized tribes that have reservation land within the state today, the Alabama Quezada, the Kickapoo, and the Ysleta del Sur Pueblo. It is now my privilege to introduce our presenter. As you may know, the Friends of the Texas Historical Commission's motto is preserving the real places and the real stories of Texas. In honor of Native American Heritage Month, our presenter tonight will introduce us to the history of Ysleta del Sur Pueblo. Rick Quezada, Director of Cultural Preservation for the Ysleta del Sur Pueblo, has a Bachelor of Arts in Anthropology from the University of Texas at El Paso and is currently working on his master's degree in history. Rick serves the tribe in many different roles. He is the primary contact for the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, or NAGPRA, as it's usually called. And he also runs the Ysleta del Sur Pueblo Cultural Center, and he runs the language program. Rick, thank you so much for joining us tonight and sharing your expertise.
Thank you. Thanks for having me and inviting me.
Yes. When you're ready, I'll share your PowerPoint. So let me know. We ready to do that now, or do you want to say any opening?
No, let's
go.
Okay.
All right, let's jump right in. And there we go. Hopefully everyone can see that all right.
Yes.
Okay, Rick, I'll let you take it from here.
All right, thank you. Welcome everyone and good afternoon. My name is Rick Quezada and I am the Director of Cultural Preservation for Ysleta del Sur Pueblo. I am also a tribal member. I was born and raised in the reservation. Um, I was taught at an early age through oral histories, the history of my people, the language, and of course the customs, and most importantly the songs, the chants associated with the religious ceremonies of the pueblo. I'd like to share a little bit about the history of my people here, and then we can go into questions as Christy alluded to in the beginning. First and foremost, the official name of our people is called Ysleta del Sur Pueblo. That is our official name. However, we are also known as the Tigua Indians. We're one and the same. It's just two different names. I would like to start off by explaining the difference. In the 1960s, when we received state recognition, the bill that was presented to the governor of Texas at the time was called the Tigua Indian bill. Tigua coming from the name of our language. That is our language classification, Tigua. And everybody kind of knew us by the Tiwas and a lot of people still do. However, when we received federal recognition in August of 1987, we changed our name to the original Spanish name of Ysleta del Sur Pueblo. And that is what I am going to be talking about, explaining the why of the Spanish name. But before I do that, I want to do some deep history. First and foremost, although we have a 340-year history here in the state of Texas, we are not a little louder. Okay. We have a 340-year history here in the state of Texas, and however, we are not native to the state of Texas. We were forcefully brought here to the state of Texas in the year 1680. Prior to that, we lived in the mother pueblo, which is known as the Pueblo of Ysleta. And as you can see from the second PowerPoint slide, there you go. The church, the white church, that is the original church, still stands, and that is at the Pueblo of Ysleta, which is about 240 miles drive northwest from us. That is the original Pueblo church. In the year 1680, there was a huge conflict in New Mexico. We like to consider that conflict to be the first American Revolution. You had Native Americans fighting a European power, and they defeated the European power at the Battle of Santa Fe in August of 1680. They defeated the Spanish. During the fight, the Spanish were forced to vacate the Spanish capital of Santa Fe, and they retreated south to the El Paso area. There was a lot of killing during the Pueblo Revolt. So the governor at the time, Governor Don Juan de Oñate, was the Spanish governor at the time. Before his retreat south to the El Paso area, he stopped at the Pueblo of Ysleta, and he regrouped his people, which is our mother pueblo. And in there, in September of 1680, he captured 317 Tiguas and forcefully brought them down to the El Paso area. He used them as hostages and as burden bearers, and trying to create a buffer between them and the the other Pueblos that were trying, the Pueblo Indians that were trying to kill them, basically. So our Pueblo, our first half of the Pueblo, our Pueblo arrives here in September, I think in August of 1680. During the winter months, Don Juan de Oñate, feeling his reputation as a governor of New Mexico was shattered, he tried to reconquer New Mexico in November of that same year. And he rode north to New Mexico to try to reconquer it. But again, he was defeated. He was defeated at the Pueblo of Cochiti. The Pueblo of Cochiti is located between present-day Albuquerque and present-day Santa Fe. They are a Carisian-speaking people, no relation to Tigua. Very, very, very different dialects, very, very different languages. So Don Juan de Oñate is defeated at the Pueblo of Cochiti, and once again he regroups at the Pueblo of Ysleta, and he captures another 385 Tiguas from the Pueblo of Ysleta, and he forces them down here. We, the present people, including myself, we're descendants of those two groups of people that were forcefully brought here in 1680 and in 1681. And we've been here ever since. What's quite a coincidence is that most of the Native American tribes that are originally from within the boundaries of the state of Texas were forced out of the state of Texas, most of them into Oklahoma. We are at the opposite end. We were forced out of New Mexico and brought into the state of Texas. And we've been here ever since. The PowerPoint here shows two churches. The first church is the white church to the right is the church of the Pueblo of Ysleta. The second church there to the left, that is a church that is located on a state park called Salinas Pueblo Missions. And that park is located between Socorro, New Mexico and Albuquerque. And that is the original homeland of some of the Tigua people that were brought here in 1680. The people that lived in that particular church, they lived in the Salinas province, and they were also Tigua speakers. Although in 1675, going with Spanish records of the time and oral histories, of course, here at the Pueblo, those people abandoned the mission here in Coray, and they moved with their linguistic cousins, the Ysleta. Reason being is that the people in Coray did not live next to a reliable water source. Almost all of the pueblos in New Mexico lived or established their pueblos next to the Rio Grande, next to a reliable water source. This pueblo was not next to a reliable water source. What they relied on was on rainwater. And next to this mission, I'd say maybe a mile from this mission, is you have the Manzano Mountains, a huge mountain range in central New Mexico. And the Manzano Mountains, what the Indians in Coray, or the Tiwas from Coray, did was they created these dams next to the mountain, and they used them to capture rainwater. So they kind of created like these man-made small lakes, and they relied on rainwater. When these small lakes would fill, that would be their water source, and that would be their irrigation water as well. We have a question from Donna Salquist to everyone. Brought here as agricultural workers and no.
And we can wait till the end of your presentation, Rick, and then we can answer all the questions in one go if that's easier.
Okay, yeah, I can answer this one. It
Okay.
was servants and forced conversion to answer Donna's question there. So the people in Korai, they were pressured, of course, with water, and there was a huge drought that ran through the Pueblo world between 1670 and about 1680. A 10-year drought. These people were severely affected because they, like I said earlier, they weren't next to a water source, and the main water source in New Mexico is the Rio Grande, or where all the Pueblos live. The second thing is Apaches were starting to raid since they found this group very vulnerable and they would fall easy prey. They, being the Apaches, started attacking these groups because of the drought, right? Where there's no drought, there's no trade. People are going hungry, force them into very, 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 very desperate situations. So what they did, the people at Korai, they abandoned Korai and then they walked 40 to about 50 miles northwest into the Pueblo of Ysleta around 1675. And they lived at the Pueblo of Ysleta for 5 years prior to the Pueblo Revolt. So some of our people are Ysla, we're all Tiguas, but some of our people are Tiguas from Korai, and most of our people are people from the Pueblo of Ysleta. But we all speak Southern Tigua, the same language. The other group of people that were forcefully brought down here to the El Paso area were the Piro Indians. And the Piro Indians lived in what is today known as the present town of Socorro, New Mexico. And there was also another village called the village of Senecu. And the Senecu Indians and the Socorro Piro Indians were also our linguistic cousins. They spoke a variant of Tigua, kind of like comparing Spanish to Italian. Very, very, very close. They were also forcefully brought down here. So in 1680, with the establishment of Ysleta del Sur Pueblo, you also had the establishment of Senecu del Sur, and you also had the establishment of Socorro del Sur. Senecu del Sur is located today in present-day Juarez, and I'll explain that in a little bit. In present-day Juarez, and those were just Piro Indians. And then the other group of Piros, they were established at Socorro del Sur. Those were a mixture of Piro Indians and then Indians from the Pueblo of Santo Domingo and Indians from the Pueblo of Jemez. And they were gulped together. That group, the Socorro group here in Texas, they died off around 1800. There was I think there was an influenza epidemic, and most of them died off. The people that lived at Senecu, they were actually absorbed into our Pueblo. Most of them were absorbed into our Pueblo. During 1910 to 1920, in Mexico, Mexico was experiencing the Mexican Revolution. And the Mexican Revolution displaced many, many, many people, many indigenous people. So with the outbreak of the Mexican Revolution, you had most of the people from the Pueblo of Senecu. They came over and they joined our village, our Pueblo. So today we have Tiguas that have Piro descendancy in them as well. I'd like to share a little point here. When the pueblos of Senecu del Sur, Ysleta del Sur, and Socorro del Sur were established, all of those pueblos, including ours, we were south of the Rio Grande, which by today's standards would have put us into Mexico. But what happened in 1848, the Rio Grande shifted where it's present located on, and it split Senecu in half, and it split our land grant in half as well. So the mission of Senecu, once the river shifted, placed that church in the Mexican side, but placed our church and the Socorro church on the American side. So when the boundary between after the War of 1812 between the United States and Mexico, when the boundary was set at the middle of the Rio Grande, it put our church and our pueblo on the American side and put Senecu on the Mexican side of the river. What's real fascinating is that we have oral histories, oral traditions. Our feast day, our main feast day is the feast day of St. Anthony. And the feast day of St. Anthony is celebrated on June the 13th of every year. And we've been celebrating the feast of St. Anthony for about 400 years. We have actually been celebrating that feast since before we arrived here in the El Paso area. We celebrated the feast of St. Anthony in original homeland of the Pueblo of Ysleta. And Senecu also celebrates the feast of St. Anthony as well. I want to backtrack a little bit on the religion and the current, I guess, belief system that we have. Currently, it's a mixture of both Catholicism and Native American religion. All of our main feast day, as I said, is June the 13th, which is the feast of St. Anthony, which is a Catholic saint. But we are no different than all of the Native Americans, all the way going from south of the border all the way to north of Santa Fe. All of the Native Americans, including all of the Pueblos, we all have feast days that are associated with a Catholic saint. Our saint happens to be St. Anthony. And then for the Feast of St. Anthony, there's Mass associated with Catholicism and with the Catholic Church. But where the Indian part comes and it mixes is we perform religious ceremonies, but the biggest ceremony that we perform in front of the church is a corn dance, a traditional corn dance that we have been celebrating in the American Southwest for over a millennia. Corn is very, very, very sacred to our people. We've been agriculturalists, like I said, for about a millennia. We planted corn, beans, squash, melons, whatever we could plant. We certainly, learned techniques for providing good fruits and vegetables for the community, for the pueblo. Well, going back to Senecu, so both of us had the corn dance. On June the 13th. And what was a real cool story that was shared to me by one of my uncles was that we kind of had like a call and response between the Pueblo of Senecu and us, since we had the main feast day and the river divided both of the pueblos. What we would do is we would start the feast and then we would be doing the corn dance here at Ysleta. This is as late as the turn of the 20th century, right before the Mexican Revolution. And at the Pueblo Senecu, they could hear our drum across the river. It wasn't like it is today. It was just an agricultural community, and we would be dancing. And then once we would finish, we could hear their drum across the river. Then we would trade. We would trade. We were brothers. We spoke the same language. We were both forcefully brought from New Mexico to Texas, and then of course Seneca shifted into Mexico, but we're still brothers. So my ancestors tell me that happened. That call and response between both of the pueblos happened right after the 1680 Pueblo Revolt, all the way to the turn of the 20th century, which is fascinating. I mean, we have people that have Pito ancestry here, and the chants are almost the same as ours, which is great. Our songs and our dance and our language survive, which is remarkable. That's where I really pay homage to my ancestors. They really kept it up, even in the face of colonialism and racism. They found a way to survive. They went into the secret world of protecting all of this for future generations out there. At the turn of the century, here at the Pueblo, the need was or the tribal members felt a need to protect the ceremonies of the Pueblo. So I wouldn't say they hired, but they contacted this notary public, and he wrote down the rules, the regulations, and the duties of the elected officials pertaining to the Feast of St. Anthony. And that was written up at the turn of the 20th century. I have lost the gentleman's name, but I remember his last name. His last name was Wall, A-W-A-H-L, Wall. I can't remember his first name. He wrote up what we know today as, I'm sorry, 1895, what we know as the 1895 Compact, where it tells how we are supposed to conduct, or explains how we are supposed to conduct the Feast of St. Anthony. And at the bottom of that page, it's signed by everyone. It's not signed by my people. The notary public, Mr. Wall, he wrote down their names. What's real fascinating is my people put their X next to their names. That is the only form of constitution, and we kind of say, but we're not a constitution tribe. We govern ourselves by oral tradition. Can you hit the next slide, Christy, please? I want to go back a little bit. Pope was a shaman. He was a religious leader, and he was a religious leader from the Pueblo of San Juan. This is an artist's rendition of what Pope might have looked like during the Pueblo Revolt. Pope was the chief organizer of the Pueblo Revolt. In 1675, Governor Trevino, before Otermin, during the 1680 Pueblo Revolt, he wanted to stamp out all forms of native religion. He felt that anything that did not conform with the Catholic Church was basically satanic in the sense that he saw the world. So Pope, being a medicine man, him along with 40 medicine men from all of the pueblos were rounded up and sent to Santa Fe to face judgment. 4 of Pope's friends were actually hung from the old Palace of the Governor's home that still exists to this day. That is the oldest government building that still functions to this day. It was known as the Palace of the Governors, and that was the capital of Spanish colonial era New Mexico. And the governor sat there and he ruled basically over the natives. Usually, the governor served for around 2, maybe 3-year terms, give or take, maybe a 4-year term. In Trevino's time, governor at the time, he rounded them up, and Pope wasn't killed, but he was severely beaten. He was severely beaten. He could barely move. 70 of his tribes people, warriors from the Pueblo of San Juan, they gathered and they went down to the governor with a show of force, telling him that if he did not release Pope, then they were going to retaliate and it wasn't going to be good. To their amazement, Trevino releases Pope. This is 1675, maybe 1676. And it takes Pope 4 years to organize the Pueblos in a concerted effort to rid themselves of Spanish rule. And the plan is simple. And the plan is right there in front of us all. He has it on his left hand, and it is a cord with 4 or 5 knots on it. The cord was a call to arms. One of the biggest weapons that the natives, that my ancestors used against the Spanish, wasn't a gun, wasn't a bow, wasn't a weapon that would harm a person. But the biggest weapon that they acquired was Spanish. Most of the tribes, currently today, there are about 4 or 5 different Pueblo languages spoken in New Mexico. For myself, I only speak Southern Tigua, meaning that I can only communicate with the people from my mother Pueblo and from people from the Pueblo of Sandia, which they also speak Southern Tigua. I wouldn't be able to communicate with Pope. He spoke Tewa from the north. So they learned a common language, Spanish, and that's how they communicated. That's how they planned the revolt. So Pope, feeling threatened by the Spanish, he moves to the Pueblo of Taos, which is the most northernest of all of the pueblos. It's almost near present-day Colorado. There he plans a revolt, and then he comes up with this ingenious plan of making these 20 to 25 cords. The reason for 20 and 25 is because each of the cord represents a pueblo. And the knots represent days. Back in the day, Pueblo Indians were not allowed to own horses. The only ones that were allowed to own a horse were Spanish and Spanish officials, and most importantly, Spanish soldiers. So the way the Pueblos relate messages to other Pueblos was through young men between the ages of 10 and about 14, maybe 15-year-olds. These young kids were your modern day marathon runners. They could run anywhere between 20 and 25 miles in a single day, relaying messages to all of the Pueblos. Each Pueblo had a set of relay runners that they would relay messages. So Pope acquires these 2 young men, And by oral tradition, I know their names. Their names were Octua and Umtua. And Octua and Umtua were from the pueblo of Tesuki, which is close to Pope's mother pueblo of San Juan. They also spoke the same language as Pope, Tigua. So he told Octua and Umtua that the time to bear arms had come, and he instructed to give a cord to each of the pueblos, but with the strictest rule to give it only to the war chief of the pueblo, because the war chief was a religious leader. They were not to give it to the governors of the pueblo, because the governors usually had some form of sympathy towards the Spanish, because they got their power recognized by the Spanish government. So they went underground, and they were only to contact the war chiefs and the caciques. The caciques are the chiefs of the pueblo. The message was simple. Cope told Octua and Umtua, go to the war chiefs of each of the pueblos and give them the cord. Tell them that I sent it. And the instructions are simple. The time to bear arms has come. You tell the war chief that they are supposed to undo a knot for each day that passes. Once the knot has no name, they are to kill the first Spanish in their pueblo. Once that is done, then all of us will gather and descend in Santa Fe, and we are to kill the governor. That was the plan. However, Octua and Umtua were captured by Spanish soldiers, and they were tortured. And Governor Oñate found out about the revolt. So it put Pope in a very precarious situation that he had to alter the revolt. And I think he started the revolt a day or two before that it was actual to start. So at the first wave of the revolt, the first people that were killed were the Spanish priests of the villages. Once that was done, then the fighting started at the pueblo of Santa Fe. During the Battle of Santa Fe, they gathered for about maybe 9 days attacking the Spanish. They were really starving them out. You had about maybe Oñate had about maybe 100 to maybe 150 professional soldiers, meaning soldiers that had armor, that had horses, that had guns, that had spears, that had daggers, that had knives. He had 150 professional soldiers at his disposal, and the rest were colonists, about 1,000. But he had around 2,000 to about maybe 2,500 Pueblo warriors ready to lay down their arms in order to be free of Spanish domination. Battle takes place, and as I stated earlier, he is defeated. He barely escapes with his life. I know that a arrow was thrust into his left side of his face. They really tried to kill him, but they couldn't kill him. He escaped. And as I said earlier, he stops at the pueblo of Ysleta, captures 317 of our people, and brings them down to the El Paso area. Can you go to the next slide? So there you have it, the knotted cord, Catua and Umtua, Pope's plan. The revolt starts on August 10th, and by August 17th, 2,500 Indians surround the city. On August 19th, Governor Termin makes his escape from the capital. Can you go to the next slide, please? Corpus Christi de la Ysleta, the original name, I guess, so to speak, But in so 1680, 1681, you see all of the pueblos congregating in what is today, back then was known as El Paso del Norte, or the Pass of the North. Today, it's known as Ciudad Juárez, because the original El Paso del Norte is Ciudad Juárez. And El Paso wasn't known as El Paso, it was actually known as Franklin. So what happened is during the French intervention, when France invades Mexico in the early 1860s, I believe, they almost overthrow the Mexican government, and the Mexican president Benito Juárez retreats all the way to the El Paso area. He assembles his army, goes back into Mexico, and he defeats the French. And in 1880, in honor of Benito Juárez, El Paso del Norte changes its name from El Paso del Norte to Ciudad Juárez in honor of their president. And when that happens, El Paso changes their name from Franklin to El Paso. Just to kind of, those are, trivia questions, I guess. Well, how do we get our names, right? Well, that's, in a nutshell, that's how Juárez got their name and El Paso got their name. So once we arrived here, we were at El Paso del Norte, aka Ciudad Juárez, for about 2 years, until finally we were fighting with each other. We were fighting with the original inhabitants of the El Paso area. They were the Manso and the Sumas. We didn't speak the same language. We were different. So that's when the Spanish decided, you know what, we need to separate them. In 1682, they separated all of us into what we know as the pueblos. They separated Senecu, the Piros, placed them in Senecu. Then the Tiguas, they placed us at Ysleta del Sur. And then finally the Piros, the Santo Domingos, and the Jaimas were at the Socorro del Sur. And then you had the river shift in 1848, and it kind of split us in half, putting us on Socorro and Ysleta on the American side, and slicing Senecu and kept it on the Mexican side. So 1682 is when we finally get established, and then we start the construction of our mission, the present day mission that I took Marie Archambault from THC, I think in July or August of this year. It was a hot day. So it took about 12 years to complete that church, and that is where we perform our corn dance. We've been performing our corn dance every year in that same mission. We established the acequia system, which is the ditch system, to plant our crops. And we still continue to plant the Three Sisters, corn, beans, and squash to this day. Can you, the next slide? And that is the earliest picture of our people, of our pueblo. And there's a little section of it, I don't know if you guys can see it, Ysleta Mission Dome way in the back. Our original pueblo was actually right in front of the old mission. And that is a picture of Nestora Pierote. And she is standing before a beehive oven. That is a pueblo oven, which was used to bake all types of food. Now we kind of only use it for bread baking, but it's an oven by all means. Next slide, please. And then finally, after almost 100 years in the valley, the Spanish issue us a land grant, which is today known as the 1751 YDSP Spanish land grant. It was given to us by Tomás Vélez de Gachupin, who was the Spanish governor at the time. In 1881, Mexican independence from Spain. Mexico recognizes our land grant, and we preserve our land grant. And the 1848 Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo also recognizes the land grant. And then we come to 1871, where the illegal incorporation of the town of Ysleta, which basically resulting in the nulling and voiding of our land grant. We lose our land grant in 1871, and we are forced to move from our original pueblo that was right in front of the mission to about 2.5 blocks northeast of our present location, and that is where we have been ever since. In the very lean years at the turn of the century, all the way up to the 1970s, it was known as the neighborhood of the Indians, because that's all we had. In our possession, we only had a couple of acres. That is where we had our Tujla, which is our church. And that is where I was born. I was born in that little hamlet. Finally, in the 1960s, we were able to piece our history together through the work of many people and many supporters of us, including the Texas governor at the time, and I think the Attorney General at the time as well were very supportive of our efforts. But there was 2 individuals that really helped our people, and they did it pro bono for 20 years. The first gentleman's name was Tom Diamond. He was our in-house attorney, helped us to take care of, he actually assisted with the 1967-68 state recognition. And then 20 years later, he was instrumental in the 1987 federal recognition of our people. The other gentleman that was very instrumental was a guy by the name of Nick Hauser. Nick Hauser was an anthropologist from U of A. And he did his field work here at the Pueblo. He did an ethnography report where he lived with my great aunt and my great uncle over the summer. And he wrote this very fascinating report on the conditions of the Pueblo, the officials of the Pueblo, and the ceremonies of the Pueblo that assisted in both the state and federal recognition of our people. Next slide, please. This is what today is known as the 1751 Spanish land grant. As you can see, right smack down the middle, that is the Rio Grande. And that purple kind of like, not square, right, but kind of like almost like a triangle type of thing is our original 1751 land grant. And as you can see, about 1/3 of it is located in present day Mexico, because of the shifting of the river. The original location of the river would have been right where you see that big red line just north of it. That is I-10. That is the original place where the actual Rio Grande actually ran in 1680. Next slide, please. And then finally, we come down to the military service. Tigua Indians of Ysleta del Sur perform services for the U.S. Army as Indian Scouts. Tigua Scouts served the U.S. Army in a major effort in 1857 to control hostile Apaches on the Gila and Black Mountain region in New Mexico. Reporting Lieutenant John Van Dusen, these are his quotes. The battle commenced at 4:30 p.m. and lasted until sunset. Now, let me get my... Until sunset, 24 Apaches killed and 26 prisoners. Several Apache braves were executed after encountered by Pueblo guides. So we served the U.S. Military installation here in El Paso. It's known as Fort Bliss. Tigua Scouts, we also served in the Presidio in San Elizario. Presidio is a Spanish fort. And then we also served at Fort Bliss, Fort Quitman, and Fort Davis. And we also assisted the Texas Rangers, believe it or not, for frontier defense against bandits and hostile Apaches and Comanches. And finally, the last battle in Texas participating in this event were Bernardo and Simón Holguín. They were war captains for the Pueblo. They served as scouts under the command of Lieutenant Bell in his detachment of the 10th Cavalry U.S. Army in 1880. Next slide, please. And that is a monument that's actually was put up by the state of Texas in 1936. Battle in June 12, 1880. 4 Pueblo Scouts defeated 20 Apaches. Right there in that spot. And my great-great-grandfather was part of that battle, and there's a lot of oral stories that are passed down from my great uncles, and then now I'm passing them down to my kids, which is kind of cool. So you have the oral history part, but then you also have the historical documents to back that up, which is just fascinating. Yeah. Next slide, please. And then finally, that is a 1970s picture of our feast day. I think that was in 1972. The man in the middle with the drum, his name was Trinidad Granillo. There he served as the war chief, and later on in during his life, he would eventually become the cacique or the chief of the pueblo. And that is all I have for today.
Okay, that I could listen to you talk all night. It's such a great storyteller.
You gotta be careful what you ask for. You talk for days.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed that, and it's such an honor to hear the history and so many details that even as I was doing research to prepare for tonight's event that I didn't catch even in the research. So it's such an honor to have seen the pictures you shared and to hear the stories and to paint that picture through time. Was really something. If you have questions, just a note to our audience, if you've got some questions or comments, you can go ahead and put those in the chat box now. And we do have some time, so we've got a few minutes to chat. So we'd love to know if you've got anything you want to share. Brad or Marie, are there any questions that you all would like to pose for Rick?
I just want to echo what you said, Christy. I could listen to Rick talk all day. Every time I hear him speak about the history of the tribe, I learn something else. So I very much appreciate you sharing everything you did tonight. Thank you.
You're welcome. As a Pueblo historian, my job is to make order out of chaos, right? Trying to present it, in a chronological form with oral histories, but most importantly with historical documents. And that's my passion. That's what I like to do, and I like to share stories that were shared with me, when I was young.
We are getting some comments and some questions, and a lot of thank yous for sharing what you've shared tonight. So lots of love there. So one question that we have is, does Ysleta del Sur have a formal relationship with the Pueblo of Ysleta in New Mexico?
Yes, we do. There is a council, and I think they changed their name. It's called the All Indian Pueblo Council. And each of the governors of the pueblos, our pueblo included, they all have a seat at the table. They discuss history, they discuss culture, they discuss language programs, what we're doing here, you know, trying to preserve and protect our you know, our heritage, right? You know, our inheritance. And there, of course, there's 12 meetings, one per month. And historically, we've been, I believe, because I used to be in the council, I believe November is reserved for us, Ysleta del Sur Pueblo. So during November, you have all of the governors coming into the pueblo, our pueblo, and we meet and we discuss and we share stories, and it's fascinating. We share a lot with Ysleta. You know, they're the mother pueblo. You know, we descend from them. So there is a working relationship with us and the mother pueblo, certainly.
Thank you, Rick. Another question that we have is, can you recommend any literature to learn more about Ysleta del Sur Pueblo? And actually, if you do have some links and things, if you'll share them with me after this presentation, I would be happy to send those out with our email with the recording of this event. So,
Sure. Visit our website, ydsp.org. That is a great website. I know I touched upon the Spanish land grant, the 1751 Spanish land grant. There's a great book out there by a guy by the name of Randy Eichhoff, and the book is titled Exiled, and it deals specifically with the land grant. There's another book out there by Rick Hendricks, and I can't remember the guy's first name, but the last name is Eber. And that is a book that is called Pueblo Sovereignty, Land and Water Rights in New Mexico and Texas. Also talks about the land grant. He has five chapters in that book. And I think we are, Malcolm Ebright, that's right. Malcolm Ebright, I saw that. And he dedicates, I believe, chapter 4 to our people.
great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so Lazaro is asking, what can you tell us about the story that Ysleta had the first Thanksgiving celebration in America?
Ysleta had I wouldn't know about that, but we've been having many Thanksgivings here, right? I don't have an answer for that, so I wouldn't be able to answer that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so Ollie's saying thank you, very fascinating, and then has a question, and I hope I'm going to pronounce this correctly. Please forgive me if I do not. It says, I recently started researching Chichimecas of New Mexico and wonder if there's a connection between the Tigua and the Chichimecas.
No connection.
Okay.
Yeah, our language base, or the mother tongue of our language, is called Kiowa-Tanoan. And out of Kiowa-Tanoan, you have 4 languages. You have the Tewa, you have the Tiwa, and then Tiwa branches off into 2. You got Northern Tiwa and Southern Tiwa. And then you got Towa, and you got the Piro language. Both of them I can kind of pick up a little bit on Tewa, but not that much. I can pick up a lot of Northern Tiwa because that's very, very related to us. I don't know Towa. But no, Chichimeca is not within our language group, so we wouldn't. It'd be totally different.
And the next question kind of touches on language as well. Someone's asking about the language program that you direct, and how do you preserve the language, and what's part of the program?
I know I shared with you before the talk So we have this, we just published a series of dictionaries. This is a children's dictionary right here. And there are about 3 dictionaries that we published. And we teach them basically 3 things, three main functions of the language. We teach them, or I teach them, how to meet and greet themselves in Southern Tiwa, how to introduce themselves in Southern Tiwa, and then most importantly, how to conduct a traditional prayer in Tiwa. Then once that is done, then I teach them the structure, the grammatical structure of Tigua, which is totally different from Spanish and English, because Spanish and English, since they're European languages, right? They follow the subject, verb, object format, and most indigenous languages do not, including Tiwa. We follow the subject, object, verb format, and I teach them where the subjects are at, and I teach them where the verbs are at, and then I teach them where the tenses are at, the past, present, and future tense. I teach them the grammatical rules, and then I teach them nouns, and then how to add a noun with the verb with the tense. And I give my classes on Saturdays from 12 to 12:45 to tribal members.
It's incredible. And thank you for showing us the children's book. I think he showed us before, but I don't know if you could hold that up again. I think our audience would love to see the inside a little bit of that. Yeah, so there's sections in the book for teaching children language, and it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, we got a lot of different
little animals. Yep, we can see it. Animals, insects. Yes, it's great. Yeah. Thank you, Rick.
Oh yeah. And these were all done through grants. We applied for grants to help assist us in organizing a curriculum that would be useful for the kids here. Although our language is really, really, really coming back, which is to me that's my legacy right there.
Yeah.
My people, not forgetting their language and speaking their languages.
Language is so critical to the culture and
cultural identity. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I have a follow-up question, if I may interrupt for a second. Is any of the Tiwa language integrated into the Catholic Mass at any point, or is that separate?
Yeah, we do that for our feast day.
Yeah,
we actually do the Lord's Prayer in Southern Tiwa for Mass. Yeah,
that's wonderful. Thank you. That was my question.
Okay. Well, Rick, I don't know if you can see all the comments in the chat thanking you for your time. And Donna says you're a treasure.
I just saw that. Yeah, thanks, Donna.
Yeah. And this has been just an incredible presentation. And thank you so very much. And we will definitely, I jotted down some of the books that you mentioned, but I may get some links from you so that we can share that in an email with our audience. And we will also put a link to the website that you mentioned. And we hope that you all have really enjoyed this presentation tonight, and we hope that you'll come back for future presentations. And Rick, we'd love to have you again at some point in the future. And if we can, take up your time and take up your PowerPoint using and and all of that. But thank you so much, and we'll be in touch with all of you who joined us tonight. So thank you again, and we will see you in December. Goodbye.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you, Marie and Brad.
You're welcome.
All right.